Good afternoon and welcome to UConn Clear's webinar, The State of the GPS Apposphere, Navigating Smartphone Data Collection Apps. My name is Dave Dixon. I am an extension educator here at UConn and part of the UConn Center for Land Use Education and Research. And I'm here with Carrie Chadwick today. She's the head of our Geospatial Training Program here at Clear. And this image you see on the opening slide here is actually a screenshot from my own iPhone because I have exactly this many apps. For those of you who are new to CLEAR or the Center for Land Use Education and Research, we are a collaboration of two departments within the College of Agriculture at UConn, the Department of Extension and the Department of Natural Resources. We are also a collaboration with the Connecticut Sea Grant program. Within CLEAR, we have several different programs from the NEMO program to the National NEMO program, Land Use Academy, Forestry program, as well as our research shop. And all those programs together are working to help communities in balancing the growth of their communities with natural resource protection. So just sort of looking to balance both of those objectives of communities. And today's webinar is a presentation of the Geospatial Training Program, which, as I said, Carrie is the leader of, along with Emily Wilson, and I sort of meddle in every now and then. With that, I will now turn over to the famous Carrie Chadwick to launch us into today's information.
Thanks, Dave. I'm not sure how famous I am, or infamous. And Dave's being modest. He helps us tremendously with some of the training that we do through GTP, and especially with the smartphone technology, he's really on trend there. So we appreciate having Dave's help, and I appreciate having Dave help me with this today because I've had a lot of work leading up to this, and he's really come through. So just a quick glance at what we're going to talk about over the next hour. I'm going to go into smartphone statistics a little bit, touching on why we're even here talking about smartphone GPS. As you'll see, there's more and more people using smartphones every day, and the technology is keeping pace with that. I'll compare some of the traditional methods for collecting location data in the field using a handheld GPS versus using a smartphone. I'll talk a little bit about what our needs assessment is here at CLEAR and what we're after, what type of data we're looking to collect, and how that fits into our training program and the needs of our constituents. And then we're going to review 5 different apps for you today. There's no way we can cover everything in an hour, so we pared this particular webinar down to some of the more basic apps for collecting field data, and then bringing that data into a mapping system, whether it's a desktop GIS or a web GIS interface. And then hopefully we'll have a little time at the end for question and answers. And I just wanted to also point out, Dave and I have been at this for a little while now, but we certainly don't know everything. We're not experts, and there's so many apps out there that we might not be familiar with. I would encourage you, if you know more than we do, or maybe you know something we don't know, please feel free to type it into the question box, and hopefully we'll be able to review some apps from your perspective at the end if we have time, or if there's anything you know about that we don't and you can clear it up for us, we'd be happy to add that to the conversation as well. Okay, so why are we even here today? As you can see from this graph, usage of mobile devices has really blossomed over the last few years, and really the trend now is towards smartphones. People are even moving away from basic flip phone, or what we playfully call dumb phone technology, to small computers that they can carry around with them. Essentially, that's what a smartphone is. And when people were polled about their smartphones, these are some of the words that came up in their responses, which I found to be pretty interesting. And if you look really closely, there are some negative words in there. Look closely, you'll see them. But for the most part, generally people are really satisfied with their smartphones and generally can't live without them. So we're going to get you involved right from the get-go. I'm going to ask you, what kind of mobile device do you own? And we're going to open the poll in just a second. And if you could answer, we'll take a look at some of your own stats. Okay, so hopefully you should be seeing this on your screen right now. 45% of you have an iPhone versus 35% working with Android, and 2% have Windows Phone, 1% BlackBerry, and 17% of you have yet to purchase a smartphone, which is fine. Maybe you'll learn something in this webinar that might sort of tip the market for you there. I always find it interesting to see what kind of technology is out there and what people are trending towards. Speaking of those trends, based on a poll by the Pew Research Center, 56% of American adults now own a smartphone, and if we look a little closer at those trends over the last 2 years, you can really see the gains. So in general, mobile device ownership has gone up quite a bit, and specifically smartphone ownership versus just traditional cell phones. In terms of platform preference from that same group of folks being polled, 28% are using an Android device, 25% are using an Apple device, 4% trend towards Blackberries, and just 1% are using Windows devices. And we can take a little closer look here, how those numbers break down over the last few years. I find it pretty interesting to see that Android and iPhone are pretty much accelerating at the same pace. Maybe the last couple of years Android has been doing a little bit better. There's a lot of devices out there on the market that use the Android operating system. I also found it a little interesting that in this particular poll, BlackBerry won out over Windows phones, but you know, BlackBerry has drives a certain market, a certain type of user, and I think Windows Phone, you know, it might be up and coming, so we'll have to keep our eyes on the trends for the Windows app market in the future. So here's our second poll. Now that we know how many of you have smartphones, how many of you have a handheld GPS receiver? We're going to open that poll in just a second. And it looks to me like the majority of you are working with a recreational grade GPS unit, followed by some of you working with a little bit more sophisticated mapping grade GPS unit or your smartphone or tablet. Okay. I think that's pretty interesting, and I hope that the folks here that are working with recreational grade GPS units or mapping grade GPS units, or even a smartphone, are going to get a little bit out of this, because a lot of what we'll be talking about today, the apps that we're going to be focusing on, really compare pretty closely to especially what a recreational grade GPS unit can collect. So let's take a closer look at how those two compare. So with a recreational grade GPS unit, and I'm generally talking about your handheld Garmin units that, you know, market for a couple $100s. The nice thing about these is they generally have built-in base maps. Sometimes you can purchase upgrades to these base maps that might have more detailed or higher resolution base maps for you to use, and they're stored on the device. So they're not relying on a cell network to pull in a base map. If you're in the middle of the wilderness, you're not going to have any trouble viewing your base map data, and of course GPS, you shouldn't have a problem getting a GPS signal either. Whereas oftentimes apps on cell phones do rely on the cell network to acquire their base map. This is starting to change a little bit. Some of the apps do allow you to cache base maps before you go out in the field to collect data, and so they allow you to do offline mapping, which is a nice feature, and there's a few apps that we'll talk about today that allow you to do that, but some of them still do require cell network connectivity to pull in those base maps, so keep that in mind. Back to the recreational grade GPS unit, generally when you're collecting data in the field, let's say it's a waypoint, a single XY location, you can tag that waypoint with an identifying name or feature name, and then you can, although it's sometimes tedious, you can type in using the little arrow button or sometimes a keyboard if it's available, really basic field notes. Whereas some smartphone apps now allow you to provide feature names along with more sophisticated attributes. A lot of the basic apps are going to limit the attributes to a couple lines at best, but some of the more sophisticated apps function a little bit more like a GIS, a Geographic Information System, where you can connect to a web server or even a database and pull in a data dictionary. So it's definitely the options within smartphones are greater than what you're going to get with a recreational grade GPS. And then the other nice thing about smartphones is they have built-in cameras. So many of these, almost all of these apps allow you to collect photographs. Several of them also allow you to collect video as well. And then when we talk about accuracy, in my opinion, these two are very similar in terms of accuracy. Generally stated, recreational grade GPS units are going to get you to within 3 to 5 meters. In my opinion, after using a recreational grade unit for many years, that's pretty right on. And often you'll actually be able to get on the lower end of that, especially if you're connected to the WAAS satellite, the Wide Area Augmentation System, which allows for real-time correction. The smartphone is going to be pretty similar in terms of accuracy. It has the added benefit of using what's called AGPS, or assisted GPS, which combines the GPS system with the Russian GLONASS system. So you have a lot of satellites that your smartphone is able to use to calculate its location. In addition, it also uses the cell phone towers for cellular triangulation, and can also use Wi-Fi networks to triangulate as well. So within all those avenues, it's able to calculate its location in various formats. Now the downside is oftentimes you don't know what it's using to calculate its location. You sort of just have to go with it. But in general, the accuracy is going to be about the same when you're comparing these two units. Here is a map that shows you, I actually did this morning when I came into work. I went out in the field and I collected, not out in the field, I went out in our parking lot and I collected data at the same time with my smartphone and a Garmin unit. And so you can see the waypoints that are in red were collected with my Garmin unit, and the waypoints in yellow were collected with my iPhone 5. I was standing in exactly the same location when I took these points, and you can see the point out by the road, which was taken right out in front of the building by our UConn sign. Again, I'm holding the units in my hands, so I was standing at the same place when I took these points, and the distance between them is about 60 feet. And where I was actually standing, just based at looking at the imagery, and my best guess was pretty much dead in the middle. So I was about 30 feet away from both of those two locations. So sort of just, it's definitely not scientific, but it just gives you a visual of how these two points, these two data collectors are mapping locations. Now, if we compare a smartphone to a higher-end mapping grade GPS unit like a Trimble unit or a Magellan, how do those two stack up? These mapping grade units often have built-in maps as well. Many times they're going to be of better quality than what the recreational grade GPS unit has. And in addition, they often have built-in data dictionaries, so they can collect all kinds of attributes. They can also connect to GIS data and store GIS data as well. A lot of them also have built-in cameras now. Generally, I don't think they're as high of resolution or quality as some of the newer smartphones on the market, but the ability to geolocate a photograph is often built into a mapping grade GPS unit. The accuracy of these is going to be better than what you're going to get with a smartphone. So as a colleague of mine at the University of New Hampshire, Shane Bratt, has said in a previous webinar that we'll highlight a little later, smartphones really are almost on par in terms of what kind of data they can collect with a mapping grade GPS unit, but their accuracy is much closer to a recreational grade GPS unit. Really quickly, I just want to make one note about accuracy in general. This goes back to 2010. Our spring NEARC conference is the Northeast Arc Users Group. It's a great group of people, kind of off subject, but if you haven't never heard about them and you're in the Northeast, you should definitely check out the NEARC website and come to our conferences. But at the spring NEARC conference, there's always what's called the GPS muster. So they go out and they hide they survey the location of a metal pin, so they know exactly where it is, and then provide the coordinates for folks, and everyone goes out with their different GPS units and tries to get closest to the pin, and then they go out later and find out who was closest and what kind of GPS unit they had. So this goes back to 2010, but if you take a quick peek at the final tallies here, my colleague Emily Wilson came in third with her Apple iPhone. It must have been, I don't know, maybe the 3G, so this was back in 2010, and she was only 3 feet off the mark with her iPhone. So I think that's pretty awesome, and all these marked in yellow are all smartphone devices. So you can see how they stack up to some of the higher end GPS units and even some of the recreational grade GPS units. A Garmin eTrex came in second. So I just find these results pretty interesting. You can see Emily there at third, and I'm way down at the bottom with my Garmin Map 60. So what are we interested in collecting, and what kind of data are we going to talk about today? So the geospatial training program here at CLEAR has a number of short courses in GIS and GPS, as many of you know, and one of them is a field class for GPS, where we go out with recreational grade GPS units and cameras, and we collect field data, including lines, or often referred to as tracks, and points, often referred to as waypoints. And then we bring that data into a desktop system or an online system, and we teach people how to download data and display it on a map. And by the end of the day, everybody goes home really happy. They can now map their trails, they can map their property boundaries, and it's been a really successful class for us. Over the last few years, we've had people interested in being able to do this with their smartphones because they already have them. It's cost effective. They already have built-in cameras and so forth, and there really is a need out there to present this kind of class using smartphones. So that's the direction we're headed in. And the type of data that we're interested in collecting is pretty basic. So points and lines, a little bit of attribute information, and photographs. And this is just an example of sort of the end product of that class. Brings in some base map data, brings in some maps, web map services, and then we bring in the GPS data and the photographs on top of that. So what we're aiming to do with these apps that we're going to be talking about is similar to this. So we're not doing sophisticated GIS here. We're not connected to an online database or web GIS. We're just looking for basic data. So the goal here is to replace our traditional handheld GPS receivers with a smartphone app. The requirements that we want to be able to meet are that the app can collect waypoints, so that's a single XY location, that they can collect a track, which is a line segment, and that we can export the data in a format that we can bring into a mapping system. And because at CLEAR we kind of aim to keep our trainings and the technology that we use cost effective to our end users, we don't want to be pointing people towards expensive apps or expensive ways to manage their data. And if the apps can collect photographs and embed videos, that's a significant bonus for us. So I'm going to pass the mic back to Dave now, and he's going to take a minute or several to go through 5 different apps that we've tested and compiled information for, and talk them through. And if you have anything to add to the discussion, please do, and we'll have some time to address questions and other things after Dave is done. Okay.
Thanks, Carrie. Okay, so in preparing for this and sort of searching through the App Store, if you go to, and I should say at the beginning that both Carrie and I have iPhones, So there is an iPhone bias throughout the review of these apps. Some of these apps are available for Android as well, including one that's available for BlackBerries. We didn't find any available for Windows phones, although we didn't really look tremendously hard, to be honest. So just saying that off the bat, most of these apps are sort of iPhone-centric, and I apologize for that, but there are some good ones that are available for Android, and I'll talk about those as well. But if you do a search in sort of the iTunes App Store for navigation apps, you get thousands of apps. And we basically broke them down into 3 general categories, and this is a gross oversimplification, but it works for my little brain. So the way I divide them up is there's sort of the basic direction apps that basically take you from point A to point B. And most of these are free. There's some that they're charging like $50 for. I have no idea why. If somebody has one of those, maybe they can tell me. I'm too much of a cheapskate to buy one to find out. But they basically just take you from point A to point B. And that's things like Apple Maps, Google Maps, Waze, MapQuest, a whole bunch of different apps out there in that category. The second category is kind of GPS apps, which are apps that try to mimic the environment and maybe even improve the environment of a handheld GPS device, like the types that Carrie's been talking about. Then the third category, for those of you who are, sort of GIS people, are the GIS apps. And these are apps that sort of integrate with an existing GIS, Geographic Information System. Either they can edit data that already exists, or they can create new data on maps and manipulate a GIS system. For this webinar, we're focusing on the middle category, just sort of those GPS units that kind of replicate a handheld GPS device. For those of you who are interested in GIS apps, we may do a future webinar on those. But the thing with GIS apps is a lot of them tend to be expensive. There's a few that are kind of free-ish, but most are in the $100 to $200 to $300 range. And we don't have that kind of cash lying around here at Clear, so we haven't downloaded a bunch of those to test out. So we're avoiding that for now. But our buddy Shane Bratt at the University of New Hampshire Extension System, he runs a geospatial training program up there as well. He did an excellent webinar just last week on geospatial apps, where he covered sort of the gamut of different apps out there, including a bunch of GIS apps. And so if you are interested in watching that webinar, go to this link, which is bit.ly/GIS app webinar, and you can watch his excellent presentation there. I think it's about 40 minutes long or something like that, so it's an easy watch. And this is a webinar that he did for the Vermont Center for Geographic Information. They have a bunch of webinars, I guess, that they also have stored on their website or YouTube channel. So let's actually get into the apps here. This is the first one that I'll cover is called MotionX GPS. And I just want to pause for a second. There is a question here. Someone's asking, what smartphone apps do we recommend if you don't have access to internet at your site? And so I will try to remember as I'm going through these apps to point out the ones that allow you to download maps so that you have them with you when you go out into the field. So you don't have to have the internet connection to pull those in. But if I forget, remind me and I'll try to address it at the end. So MotionX GPS is probably the most popular GPS app, at least in the Apple iTunes Store. It is perennially on the top 10 list of navigation apps, all navigation apps. And so it's pretty good, and it's been around for a long time. It's cheap. It's $2. It's not free. I know some people only download free apps, and I used to be one of those. But the free apps are getting sort of more and more sparse as the years go on. But this one's only $2 for the iPhone version. There's a separate version for iPad, which is called MotionX GPS HD. I think it's just a bigger screen, and maybe it looks a little bit prettier. But you do have to pay for that separately. You can collect everything you want to collect in MotionX GPS, like tracks and points and photos, as you are, walking around out in the field. There's a variety of maps available within the app that you can use as your base map. MotionX has their own road and terrain maps. There's Bing Maps, Apple Maps, Google Maps, as well as NOAA Marine Maps. So if you are out in your boat or something like that, you can also use the NOAA Marine apps within this app. So also in terms of sharing from the app, you can take whatever tracks you create while you're out there and share those with folks, as you can see on the screen here on Facebook or Twitter, or you can also send folks an email from right within the app. And when it sends the email, it sends both a GPX and a KMZ file. GPX is sort of the standard geospatial format. KMZ is the Google-specific format, so you can then open that file in Google Earth. It also, though, creates an online map on the MotionX website that you can share with folks, and that's what's shared through Facebook and Twitter. It's basically just a link to your map on their website. And from that map, you can then open that up in Google Maps, and if you have a Google My Maps account, you can save that to your account. In terms of some of the cool of this app, what makes it stand out, it has a lot of interesting things in it. For one thing, you can search Wikipedia from right within the app. I'm not really sure what this function is for. I guess if you're out in the field somewhere and you come across a spotted turtle or something and you want to look up information about that, you can do it right from within the app. Kind of bizarre, but it's there, maybe of interest. Also, the fact that it does create its own online map, so you don't have to then try to take this into some kind of system to create your own online map, and sort of somewhat integration with Google Maps. You can connect to other map services. If you have map services loaded on the web, you can connect to them and use those services as your base map, but you do have to pay an extra $5 as an in-app purchase to have the privilege to do that. And I should mention this is only available for iPhone. Someone did just do a search for it in the Android store, and unfortunately it's not available in the Android store. And now in terms of the cons, the negatives of this app, I am not a huge fan of this app. Because it's been around for a long time, I think they keep adding features to it, and as a result they've kind of lost their way of sort of navigating through the app. And so it's kind of a convoluted user interface at this point, and so I apologize if the makers of this app are on this phone, but are on the call, but that's just sort of one man's opinion. The other thing is when you're sharing your tracks, if you have a bunch of photos on there, it only will send one photo with that track. Also, when you share waypoints, you have to share every waypoint separately. So from a sharing standpoint, it's not the best of the apps, but it does have some good things going for it, and obviously very popular, so it has a lot of users. And this one, I do believe you can download. In fact, I know you can download maps for sort of offline use. So this is one of those that you can use without internet connection. The second one I'm going to talk about is called Survey GPS. It's kind of the flip side of MotionX. It is very simple. Its basic goal is just to collect points and tracks and photos and things like that. And so it's very simple from that standpoint. It's also cheap. It's $2. There is an upgrade that I'll tell you about in a minute. It's $10 that you would probably, in most cases, want to buy. So that would bring the cost up to $12. And you can collect all kinds of information in this one. You can collect tracks, points. You can collect photos. This is one of the ones you can also collect video as well as audio. So if you're out in the field and you want to, videotape some kind of I don't know, violation going on or something like that in progress, you can do that. Or if you want to record your voice, a note or something like that, you can record the audio. So that's pretty unique about this app and a pretty neat thing. In terms of the base maps, it's pretty limited. There is no ability to download offline maps within this app, at least as far as I can tell. It has 3 different types of maps. There's roads, satellite map, and the hybrid version, which sort of combines those two, but that's about it. You can't connect to any sort of online maps that you may have. In terms of sharing, it shares something called a TMX file, which is Survey GPS's own file system. So if you are sharing with other people with the Survey GPS app, it works great. Sharing it with anybody else, they're not going to be able to read it, most likely, unless there's some kind of hacker that can sort of figure out that file code. The coolest thing about this app is the ability to save video and audio, as well as its simplicity and ease of use. As I mentioned, the sort of add-on options, if you pay the extra $10 for the Pro version, you can then share a bunch of different file formats with people, either map info, you can share a shape file to use in ArcGIS, and you can also export a GPX file. So that makes this app much more useful for folks in terms of sharing with other people. In terms of my negatives about this, and again, this is just my personal opinion, not endorsed by the university or extension or anybody else, just sort of in using it, this is sort of my knee-jerk reactions. The user interface is a little bit quirky, but it's simple, so I like it. The base maps, as I mentioned, are very limited. You can't have there's not a lot of different options there. There's also not a lot of support on their website. If you go to their website, it's hard to even find information about the app, never mind sort of technical support. So you're kind of on your own once you find it, unless you have a better link than I do. But I like this app a lot. It could be really awesome if they sort of, as they continue to grow. It's a fairly new app. Okay, third app, and I think this is the most expensive of the apps. This is one that actually, for you Android fans, is available for Android. It is $20 on the iPhone and $10 on the on Android phones. I don't really know why the Android folks get a discount. I don't know if there's a difference in functionality. I don't have an Android phone to test it out on, so maybe if somebody has one and has used it, you can let us know. But it is available for Android, and it's a pretty darn good app. You can also collect tracks and points and photos on this one. Fairly easy to do. You can create a waypoint at where you're standing, or if you want to create a waypoint somewhere else on the map, you can do that, which is useful, particularly if your GPS signal is not putting you in the right spot. You can also create a route or take a picture. There's a ton of map layers that you can use as base maps, and this isn't even all of them that you see on the screen here. This is just sort of some of them. You scroll down, you get a whole bunch more. There's USGS maps, Forest Service maps, Google, Esri maps, OpenStreetMap. And in terms of sharing, you can email. If you send an email from within the app of your track and points, it will send a GPX file and a KML file and all of your photos sort of in one email to whoever you want to send it to. It also can save the information and send it to EveryTrail, which some of you may be familiar with. EveryTrail is another app and website, mostly hiking trails and things like that. So if you are have an open space property and you want to create a hiking map, you can then save that directly to EveryTrail. The cool thing about Gaia GPS is they also have a very nice web-based map. So every track you create is saved to your account on Gaia GPS's website, sort of like what they call the Gaia Cloud. And this, as you can see here, it saves your map with all your points and all the photos associated with that point. You can then share this on Facebook or Twitter or send somebody a link. You can change the base map, look at all kinds of different data based on your thing. On your track, so very useful, and you can then just take this and put a link to it on your website or whatever you may have, and then people will be able to see your information from there. There also is a pro version of this app. The pro version is $20 a year. You have to pay every single year, but what it does is it has the ability to layer maps with transparencies, and I think this is the only one that I found that can do this. But basically, you can have several different maps stacked on top of each other, just like a GIS system, and change the transparency so you can see through to all of them. It also adds something called map box imagery, which Carrie probably knows more about than I do, but I guess it's very updated, very recent satellite imagery. So if you need very recent imagery, that's something that's added. It also adds weather information and tide information. Downsides of this app is, at least if you're an iPhone user, it's expensive. It's the most expensive one in our lineup. And there's also no connection to sort of your own map services that you may have. You can't sort of create those as base maps. Okay, our fourth app is actually put out by the Trimble company, which makes some of the fancier handheld GPS units. It's called the Trimble Outdoors Navigator, sort of a mouthful of a name. But this one is available for Android as well. It's available for iPhone, and it's the only one that's available for BlackBerry. So for you BlackBerryans out there, this one's for you. This one is free. At least there's a free version of it that I didn't know about until I bought the pro version. But anyway, it is there is a free version. It's pretty easy to use. You sort of launch the map, and you can sort of turn on a track and start recording your track. You can save points, photos, audio, just by hitting that little mark button you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the screenshot. And it's pretty easy. You click on that and you just select whether you want to save a photo or a waypoint or a video or audio, and it does that for you. It's a little bit limited in terms of the base maps, but there are Bing maps and OpenStreetMaps, as well as MyTopo maps that you can use as your base map. In terms of sharing, you can share a GPX file. It also has the ability to save online maps. So like two of the other ones, it does create an online presence, and you can sort of, we'll show you more about that in a minute. So when you do email, this is what comes up. It's basically a GPX file, and then all the sort of video files or audio files that you have associated with that track will also be emailed to whoever you're sending it to. This is what the web map looks like that it automatically creates when you create a track. The cool thing about their web maps is that you can then embed this in another website. If you can read the small print, on the left-hand side there's an option to embed this map. So you can just click on that and it will create an embeddable version that you can put on your website and people can use. So it's pretty cool. And also the cool thing is it's one of the ones that you can record audio. There is a pro version of this app, and what that gets you is offline maps. So again, this one you can sort of download maps to your phone so that they're there, so you don't have to worry about having that internet connection to download the maps. It also adds the ability to save video to your waypoints, so that you can sort of do the same thing that you can do with Survey GPS. They have another level, just to confuse things even more, which is Elite membership. And that's $3 a month or $30 a year. And basically what this gets you is weather and public lands overlays map that you can place over whatever base map you have, as well as unlimited map downloads. So they have a whole bunch of different maps available that you can download whenever you need to use within the app. Sort of the negatives of this one for me is it's kind of like an Easter egg hunt. There's a lot of great things hidden within this app, but you got to find them, and sometimes it's kind of hard. And a lot of times I would remember that there was an option there to do it, but I didn't remember where it was. And that may just be me, but anyway, that's my opinion. And finally, the website is very cool. It's great that you have all those options. A lot of those options are not available from within the app, so a lot of the sort of sharing stuff that you want to do, you have to do from the website. Okay, and now the fifth and final one. This one is called GPS Kit. This is my personal favorite, the one that I've used the most. It's only available for iPhone, unfortunately, but it's a pretty good app. It's a little bit pricey. It's $10. So 2 trips to Starbucks. But I think that it's worth it. You can track, you can do all the same stuff in terms of tracks and points and photos. It also has the ability to save a waypoint with lots of notes, so it has a lot of information. So if you really want to write a novel, well, probably not a novel, but a short blog article within a waypoint, you could do that within this app. And so it's pretty useful. It has a ton of available base maps from Google, MapQuest, Bing, OpenStreetMap, Topo Maps, as well as the ability, if you look on the screenshot at the very bottom, it says map name. If you click on that, it basically opens up a screen that allows you to connect to any map service or map that you have online. You just put in the URL, and that will then become your base map. So very easy to connect to your own base maps. You can't edit those maps from within the app, but at least you can see them underneath your data. Finally, in terms of sharing, this one has the most sharing options. You can select exactly how you want to send it to another user, whether it be a GPX file or a KMZ file. If it's really big, you can use something called iTunes Export to share the files, which is also another option for you. So the cool things about this one is that because it emails a KMZ file is basically a zipped up KML file, which is what Google Earth uses. So it basically takes all your points, all your notes, all your photos, and zips them into one file that you can then open in Google Earth and have them all available for you right away. In terms of options, the only add-on option for this one is there is an HD iPad version. The regular version works on the iPad, but there is an HD iPad version that's $15 for those of you who are HD addicts. In terms of the cons for this one, there is no online map like there is for 3 of the other ones. And the other thing is just 3 weeks ago when I looked at this app, it was $20. So either it's on sale or they're trying to be more competitive and now it's $10. But either way, if you're interested in this one, I would get it soon. So that's it for sort of the broad view of kind of the 5 apps that we've selected that we think are useful for most folks. So once you collect data with these apps, how do you then take that and make use of it? And so here's Kara to tell you about that.
Great, thanks, Dave. Before I get to that, we had a question come in while Dave was talking, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, Dave, but I'll throw it out there, and if anyone else on the call or on the webinar knows the answer, you can join the conversation by typing into the answer box. But someone asked if we knew which one of these apps conserved the most battery and how the battery usage compared between the apps.
Most of the apps have different options for you to be able to conserve battery while you're out there. So especially, I know GPS Kit does, and the Trimble one does, and MotionX does. They all have different settings that you can set to sort of conserve battery. A lot of times it's turning your screen off, but the GPS is still running in the background. But most of these apps do have that function. I don't think Survey GPS does, but I think the others all do.
And in general, some tips for conserving battery when you're out in the field is things like turning off your Wi-Fi if you don't need it, turning off your push notifications, turning off your Bluetooth connection, of course turning off your screen if you don't need it. So all those are sort of best practices for conserving batteries when you're out there. There's also devices that you can use to plug into your phone to extend your battery life as well. So all those are options, but that's another good point when you're comparing a smartphone with a recreational grade GPS unit or other units. Generally, battery life is going to be an issue. Smartphones don't last nearly as long as some of those other standalone GPS units. Okay, so now you have all this data. Dave talked about the 5 different apps, and he talked about lots of different data types. What do you do with it? And if you think about, think back to the beginning of our webinar when I talked about our class and the type of data that we collected and the products that we produce at the end of the day, one of those is a web map or a desktop GIS map. And in order to do that, you need to be able to get your data out of the GPS or out of the smartphone. So I'll talk through some of these options in the next few slides. So this is just a visual showing you the 5 different apps that Dave talked about and then the outputs that he also mentioned. And it's sort of just combining them all in a single slide to show you what kind of outputs are available from these 5 options that we discussed today. And in terms of getting this data out into a format that can be consumed by your desktop GIS or your web GIS, we're going to be talking about these 4 different, or really 3 different formats. Our GPX file format, KMZ or KML, shape file format, and then Dave mentioned a few apps have these web interfaces as well, which I won't really focus too much on as we talk about using the data itself. Oh, and I'll go back to that slide for just a second. The blue checks next to Gaia GPS and Trimble Outdoors under KMZ indicate that those 2 apps allow you to export in a KML file format. The difference between KMZ and KML is simply that a KMZ file is a zipped or a compressed file format. It's a compressed KML. And again, KML, KMZ are the Google file format that can be used in Google Maps and Google Earth and actually other online GIS or mapping systems as well. So the only difference between those 2 is that they don't compress the file when you export it from the app. So this is, there's a lot of arrows going on here. We're going to break this up into 2 parts. The top option is showing you what you can do to get your data into a desktop GIS. So in this example, and what we'll be talking about is Esri's ArcMap desktop GIS software. And then the lower example is showing the data inside Google Maps or an online mapping system, whether it's Google Maps or ArcGIS Online or some other product. So I'll break this into 2 parts. Okay, so if we're talking about desktop GIS, you're going to be interested in the 2 formats, GPX and shapefile. So only one of the apps exported to shapefile. Which one was that, Dave? Do you remember?
I don't know. It's all of
I'm sorry. It's Survey GPS. I think back to that table with the check mark. Survey GPS allows you to export directly from shapefile format, while the other ones allow you, all the other ones allow you to export from GPX, or export to GPX, excuse me. And if you're working inside desktop GIS inside ArcMap, you know you can't add a GPX file directly to ArcMap. So you have to go through some sort of file format conversion. In my particular, my tool of choice is called DNRGPS. I have a slide on DNRGPS in just a second, so I'll show you a little bit more about that. But it's a free open source product. It allows you to convert file formats. You simply import your GPX file and then export it as a shapefile, and it can go right into your desktop GIS. And of course, if you're working with Survey GPS, that shapefile can go right into your desktop. Now, when you're working with photographs, you're going to have to set up hyperlinks to those photographs. I'll show you what a hyperlink looks like inside desktop GIS in just a second. But both the GPX file and the shapefile reference the location of that photograph, whether it's stored locally on your desktop, or even better if it's stored on the cloud through a URL. This is DNRGPS. It's a product that's available from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. If you just Google DNRGPS, it will get you to this page, or if you put in that long link at the top, it will also get you there. It is an awesome little piece of software. We've been using it for years here. You don't have to have a Garmin GPS unit to use it, but you can connect directly from a Garmin unit to it if you are working with a standalone GPS unit, or you can just use it as a file transfer system. So you can import a file and then export it in a variety of different formats that are GIS friendly. So that was just a little plug for DNRGPS.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes.
If you're a Mac user, there's a program called Garmin Basecamp, and it basically does the same thing as DNRGPS.
Good point, Dave. DNRGPS is only available for Windows users. And then, oh, it looks like I forgot to add my animation to this slide, so it's kind of hard to see what it's doing. This is what happens when you put your webinar together at the last minute. But underneath those screenshots shows you the map that you've been seeing with the GPS track around the building that we're in, and then a waypoint with a photograph over it. And in order to create that hyperlink to the photograph, you need to go into the layer properties for that waypoint. So you see the MotionX waypoint in the table of contents. You would right-click on that and go to the layer properties, which is being shown on the left side of your screen. And then from the display tab, there's an option for setting up your hyperlink field. So for you GIS users in the audience, this is all second nature to you, but for anyone that's unfamiliar with setting up hyperlinks within your desktop GIS, if you're using ArcMap or ArcGIS, you can do that through the layer properties. So you specify the file name, and then in that file name field, you're going to put either the direct link to that image file or the URL to that image file. And then you just simply use your hyperlink tool to click on the point in your map, and it will connect directly to that photograph. So there is a little legwork here that has to be done. MotionX isn't going to automatically do this for you, unfortunately. Hopefully, you know, some of these apps that's coming down the pike, that would be nice if there was a way to automate that a little bit more. So there's certainly legwork that has to be done in order to set up these hyperlinks. And it pays to take good field notes in a way so that you know what photographs are going to be associated with what waypoints. So for you folks that are more interested in doing GIS on the web, there's a number of different products out there that you can use, ranging from Google Maps, which many of us are familiar with, to something more like ArcGIS Online. There's a free version of ArcGIS Online for personal use. This is an Esri product. There's also ArcGIS Online for organizations, which is a subscription-based user account, which costs a little bit more than free. Let's just put it that way. But if you're just using it for personal use, I suggest signing up for a personal account, and there's a lot you can do with ArcGIS Online. Again, your data sources are going to be either a GPX file format or a KML or KMZ file format from these apps that we talked about today. From GPX, you can import the file directly into ArcGIS Online just by using the Add Data option. You can also import KMZ files to ArcGIS Online as well, and you can bring in KML and KMZ into Google Maps and also Google Earth, which is a desktop application. Now for these online mapping platforms, the photographs themselves are going to have to live online, so you'll have to have a method for uploading your photographs either to your web server or even to something like a Facebook account or a Picasa or Flickr account. So as long as your photograph can be uploaded somewhere where it has a URL, you can then connect to those or hyperlink to those photographs. And some of these outputs, if it's a KMZ file, KMZ files are, again, compressed KML files, and the nice thing about KMZ files is they contain the photographs within the file itself. So if you open up a KMZ file within Google, it's going to show you the photographs and contain the photographs as well. So that's an added bonus of KMZ files. So I don't know, Dave, do you think we have some time for this, or do you want to open up the floor to
this is actually
questions?
This actually responds to one of the questions we got. Someone asked about accuracy with these apps, and this slide will go to that a little bit, but I also do want to say about in terms of accuracy, the apps don't really control the accuracy. It's your phone and the GPS system that's in your phone that controls it. And I know that at least with the iPhone, they've progressively increased the capacity of those GPS chips. So I know that the new 5S has sort of the best GPS of any of the iPhones anywhere, and I think it's at least on par with the best Android phone. So it's really a matter of that and less a matter of your app. That being said, we did notice some difference within these apps. And also within the MotionX GPS app, they actually allow you to select which type of system you're using to sort of get the GPS signal. So whether you're using cell phone tower triangulation or whether you're using direct connection to the satellite GPS system, you can select that from within the app, and that may improve your accuracy. The other thing I'll say is that for a lot of these, if you're saving a point and you're looking at the map and it's not saving it in the right point, not right place, several of these apps, and I know that I believe Gaia does this, and GPS Kit and Trimble, you can move that point to the proper place so it's in the right location if your unit is not sort of recording it in the right location. But with that, I'll let you, Carrie, sort of show you this slide and walk you through it.
So you should be seeing, what we're looking at now is ArcGIS Online. It's a map I put together earlier. And I just find this interesting. This is in no way scientific. Again, this was the walk I did earlier this morning, and I'm going to show you first a track line that was collected with the GPS Kit iPhone app on top of the track that was also collected at exactly the same time with my Garmin unit. So if I show you the photograph of what it looked like this morning, and for those of you that are not located in Connecticut or the Northeast, it is snowing right now outside our window, so I was doing this in a little bit of a blizzard this morning, but this is what the apps look like after I did the walk around our building. You can see the GPS Kit also collected the photographs, which is really nice. But essentially, I did my walk holding these right next to each other while they were collecting data simultaneously. So you can see, obviously, the tracks are not right on top of each other, and in some areas the Garmin unit is probably doing a better job, and at other times the iPhone is doing a much better job. So, in general, it all kind of comes out in the wash with these two when you're comparing accuracy, in my personal opinion. More or less they're going to be. And again, the difference between this location and this location was about 60 feet. This was where that waypoint was taken. If I turn my waypoints on, and I showed you these waypoints earlier, this is a sign out front of our building, and you can see, I don't know, can they see my pointer? Probably not. But the waypoint out in front by the street is the sign in front of our building, and those two waypoints were taken at the same time, and they're about 60 feet apart. So it just visually gives you an idea of how these two different types of data collectors compare. I'm going to turn the Garmin tracks off and show you now when I click on these points, they have photographs embedded in them. I can see that these photographs can be enlarged. Sort of just a really nice product that comes out of using GPS Kit and ArcGIS Online.
Do you want to layer some of the other ones on while I sort of talk some of the questions? We only have a few minutes left, so while Carrie is sort of showing you the other apps and their tracks sort of laid over each other, I want to just respond to some of them before I know a lot of you have to go. First of all, one thing for Android users, somebody said check out Custom Maps app for Android, which allows for georeferencing of any map image and is a good app. So that's a recommendation from a listener. Several people asked if there's a download of our presentation available. We will post on our website along with the recording of the webinar. We will post a PDF of this presentation, as well as we have a handy, well, somewhat handy, we think, chart of the 5 apps that we reviewed and sort of all the categories that we reviewed them in and sort of listing what each one of them does. We will post a sort of a PDF of that chart as well, so you can just sort of remember at a glance which apps we said what about. Several people asked about usability, particularly in terms of using these apps with high school students, which ones are more user-friendly than others. That's a little bit subjective. I don't know, Carrie may have a different opinion than me, but for me, GPS Kit is the easiest to use, just because it's pretty straightforward and easy to find stuff. Trimble is a really cool app. It's just a little bit more hard to navigate for a novice user, but for kids today, it's probably a lot easier for them than it is for me. So, you know, I think any of these would probably be okay. Let me see if there's any other questions here. Carrie, do you want to say any more about?
I have been listening.
Do you want to say any more about the other tracks for the other apps?
Right now I'm addressing a question where somebody mentioned that the difference between the Garmin track and the the iPhone track is a matter of rotation, which in looking at it, it looks like that is the case. So I'm just re-adding it to make sure it wasn't a user error. Of course, now it didn't come in. I had this problem earlier with ArcGIS Online. It wasn't letting me add my track very well, so I'll try it from a shapefile. But to answer, so it looks like it's not, it came in the same, looking the same. Sorry, I'm sort of winging it here.
Okay. I'll let you play. There's a follow-up to the accuracy question. Someone was wondering if we were saying that the Android GPS chip is more sensitive than the Apple one. I don't really know, and between the two of them, and because Android, there's it's like Baskin-Robbins. There's a million flavors of Android phones from all kinds of different developers, and they have all kinds of different GPS chips. So I don't really know which one is the best. I know that the iPhone one is really good, though. I've read several reviews that it's, especially in the newest iPhone, it's extremely, or it's the most accurate of among smartphones. There may be an Android one out there that's more so or as much, but I don't know. Another recommendation for an Android app is called GPS Essentials. It allows you to navigate, manage waypoints, tracks, routes, a lot of different stuff it allows you to do. Another one that I've heard about for Android that's supposed to be good, and I haven't been able to test it out, is called Locus, L-U-C-U-S. It's also a pretty interesting looking, at least, GPS app, although I haven't checked it out, so that's something to explore if you're an Android user.
Someone mentioned or asked the question, when the coordinates measured by an app in an iPhone and a Garmin GPS receiver are very different, which one should be chosen? That's a good question, and I don't necessarily have an answer for that, because right now in terms of the accuracy, the estimated accuracy, they're both going to be about the same, and you don't really know when you're out there. One thing to mention, I mentioned it earlier, that most recreational grade GPS units now are only using the global positioning system. They're not able to connect to the Russian GLONASS system, which allows for many more satellites to be used in calculating position, where Smartphones are able to, most of the newer smartphones on the market can do that, in addition to using assisted GPS to triangulate its location as well. So I think in general everything's improving, but if you're using an older recreational grade GPS unit, it just might not be on par with what a smartphone can use, particularly if you're in a civilized location rather than out in the middle of nowhere.
Somebody asked, do any of these apps allow you to create polygons rather than lines? None of these 5 that we reviewed can do that. It's more in the category of kind of what I was talking about, the GIS apps. I do believe that the webinar that I talked about that Shane Bratt did has information on some of the apps that can do that, and they range in price. They tend to be a little bit more pricey, but I think there are some in there. And I know that Locus app that I talked about for Android, it does allow you to create polygons as far as I know, at least in the screenshot it showed one. So I believe it does.
And my good friend John McGee followed up by saying most of the newer recreational grade GPS units can also lock onto the GLONASS system, even cheaper entry-level Garmin units. So that's a wonderful thing. I am still using a MAP 76 and a MAP 60, which I know cannot do that. So depending on how new your unit is, it may or may not be able to do that. And if it can, you're definitely going to see an improvement in accuracy.
And just a clarification on the Locus app, it's spelled L-O-C-U-S. I don't know how I spelled it before, but that's the right way to spell it. Okay.
All right. You can always email us. Oh, and I want to show one last slide because it's helpful. How do I go back to? Just a second.
We have to launch the presentation again.
Oh, sorry. This is my fault. Is that helpful, Dave?
Yes.
Hang on. Stand by.
That's fine. Just leave it at that.
Okay, it's going to refresh in a second. But we have a final slide here that is going to show you all the apps that we talked about today and give you a rundown of what Dave covered, all in one slide. So while this is a lot to look at, I think that you'll find it particularly useful when you're comparing at least the ones that we talked about today. And you can always email us if you have questions or comments. We're always looking for advice and direction and input. So please get in touch with us. Our emails, I don't want to change the slide, but you can contact me at carrie.chadwick@uconn.edu, or Dave is david.dixon@uconn.edu, and you can find our email on the CLEAR website as well. That's clear.uconn.edu.
One last question that was asked sort of in 2 different ways. One asked if any of these apps save watermarks to the photos, and none of them do, as far as I know. I know that the GPS kit, when you export a KMZ, it has a little sort of GPS kit logo that appears within the KMZ file when you open it in Google Maps or Google Earth, but you can turn that off, so it's not a big deal. Somebody also asked, can you add a watermark to your photos with any of these apps? And as far as I know, no, you can't. That's about wraps it up. Sorry for keeping you a little bit longer.
Okay, thanks everybody. We look forward to hearing some feedback from you and hope to see you maybe at another CLEAR event in the future.